The night was quiet on the small human colony at the edge of the galaxy. Stars shone like tiny silver sparks in the black sky. The air was still and the houses were dark. People slept after a long day of work, trying to survive on a world that gave little comfort. But one boy was awake. He could not sleep. His name was Jarek, and though young, his eyes carried a fire that did not belong to his age. He often sat outside his family's small hut, staring up at the endless sky, dreaming of ships and worlds far away. That night, something strange caught his attention. At first, he thought it was just a trade ship passing through, but then more lights appeared, moving in formation. They were not the soft golden lights of merchants. These were red, harsh and cold like burning eyes in the dark. His chest grew tight. He had heard stories of what those lights meant. Pirates. The ground seemed to shake as the ships broke through the clouds, landing outside the colony. Dust and fire filled the air. Alarms began to scream, waking the people. Mothers grabbed their children. Fathers tried to prepare weapons, though they knew they could not fight what was coming. The colony had no army, no soldiers, no defense. Only fear. Jarek did not run like the others. His legs trembled, but he could not look away. Something inside him pushed him forward. He wanted to see them, the monsters from the stories, the shadows that made strong men afraid to travel the stars. He slipped away from the crowd, moving closer to where the ships had landed. His heart beat so fast he could hear it in his ears, but curiosity burned stronger than fear. The pirate ships opened, and out came warriors covered in black armor. Their weapons glowed with cruel red light. They laughed as they spread into the colony, smashing doors, stealing food and valuables, dragging people into the streets. Jarek hid behind a broken wall, his small frame pressed tight against the stones. He dared not breathe too loud. Then he saw him, their leader. Taller than any human, his skin gray like steel, his eyes glowing like molten fire. He wore armor marked with scars of many battles, and in his hand he carried a blade that hissed with deadly energy. The crew fell silent when he walked. Even the laughter stopped. His name was whispered like a curse across the galaxy. Captain Varos looked around with slow, steady eyes, as if the colony was nothing more than a weak nest to be burned. He spoke in a deep voice, cruel but calm. "Take what you want. Leave nothing." His words carried like thunder, and the pirates roared with madness, rushing into the houses again. Jarek felt his throat go dry. This was no story. This was death standing before him. He wanted to run back, to hide with his family, but his legs would not move. He could not stop staring. Why did this man, this monster, feel so different? He was not just strong. He carried a presence, something darker, something that pulled even Jarek's young eyes toward him. Varos turned suddenly, his gaze sweeping across the shadows. For a moment, Jarek thought those burning eyes had seen him. He pressed deeper into the wall, biting his lip to keep silent. His heart screamed inside his chest. If the pirate captain found him, he would die. Yet still he did not move. Still he watched. Around him, the colony was falling apart. People cried. Fires spread. The night was broken by screams and laughter. But Jarek's eyes were locked on Varos. He felt fear, yes, but also something else. A strange pull, as if fate itself had tied a string between them. Varos raised his blade, pointing at the sky. His voice carried again. "Fear me, humans. Remember this night. We take what we wish and none can stop us." The crew cheered. Jarek's fist clenched. His people bowed their heads, but he did not. Inside him, a spark had been lit. He whispered under his breath, so quiet no one could hear. "One day, someone will stop you, but fate is cruel." For in that same moment, one of the pirates shouted, pointing toward the broken wall. A small figure was seen hiding there. The crew turned. Their glowing eyes locked on the boy. Jarek froze. His heart dropped. He had been seen. The laughter of the pirates grew louder as they dragged him out, their rough hands gripping his arms. He kicked and shouted, but it was useless. They threw him to the ground before their captain. Dust rose around him. Captain Varos stepped closer, towering above him. His shadow covered the boy completely. He looked down, silent, his glowing eyes scanning the small, fragile human. The crew waited for the order to kill, but the captain did not speak right away. He tilted his head, studying Jarek like a puzzle. Then slowly, a cruel smile touched his lips. The night grew quieter. Even the pirates seemed unsure. Jarek's chest rose and fell as he tried to catch his breath. Fear burned through him, but so did something else. He met the captain's gaze without bowing his head. Varos narrowed his eyes. The silence stretched, And then the captain laughed. A deep, dangerous laugh that echoed through the colony. No one knew why. Not yet. But that laugh would change everything. The laughter of Captain Veros rolled like thunder across the ruined colony. It was not the laugh of joy but of danger, the kind that made the strongest warriors shiver. His crew, confused, shifted uneasily. They had expected him to crush the human boy in a single strike, to silence his courage before it spread like fire. But instead the great pirate laughed, his eyes burning brighter as he stared at Jarek. The boy stood shaking, but he did not lower his gaze. He was small, weak, unarmed, yet in that moment something about him was different. Most humans begged, cried, or looked away. But this boy, he stared at death as if daring it. Veros bent down slowly, his massive frame casting a heavy shadow over the child. His voice was low, sharp, and heavy with menace. "You are not afraid, little human?" Jarek swallowed hard, his throat dry. His voice trembled, but the words came out. "I am afraid, but I will not bow." A stunned silence swept through the pirates. No one had ever spoken like that to Captain Veros and lived. The crew shifted, waiting for the captain's blade to cut the boy in two. But instead, Veros straightened, his expression unreadable. He turned to his crew. "This boy," he said slowly, "does not understand death. He looks at me as if I am nothing. Perhaps he wishes to test his courage." His voice dripped with cruel amusement. Then he pointed his blade at Jarek, its red energy glowing inches from the boy's face. "So let him test it." The pirates roared in approval, circling around like hungry beasts. They wanted blood. They wanted a show. They slammed their weapons against the ground, chanting the boy's doom. Jarek's heart raced. His knees wanted to collapse, but he forced himself to stay upright. His body screamed to run, but he clenched his fists instead. He would not give them the satisfaction of fear. Veros took a step back, raising his weapon high. His voice was like fire. "Human boy, I give you a choice. Run and I will let you live. Stay and you will fight me. The fight will be your grave." The crew laughed, shouting for him to run. They wanted to see him crawl away like the others always did. But Jarek shook his head. His voice, though small, carried through the night. "I will not run." The laughter stopped. The pirates froze, staring in disbelief. Even Veros tilted his head as if not expecting that answer. For a long moment, the galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath. Then slowly, Veros lowered his blade to his side and stepped forward, his armored boots pounding against the dirt. He stood face to face with the boy, towering over him like a mountain. "So be it," the captain said softly, almost with respect. "Show me if humans still have fire." The crew roared with madness, forming a circle. Torches were lit, weapons clashed together. The colony people were forced to watch, their eyes wide with terror and sorrow. Mothers wept, fathers turned away, knowing the boy was doomed. Jarek stood alone in the circle of fire and steel. He had no weapon, no armor, only his courage. He whispered to himself, "If I fall, I will fall standing." Veros moved first. His strike was slow, almost lazy, but heavy enough to split stone. Jarek leaped aside, the blade cutting deep into the ground where he had been. The pirates laughed louder, some cheering, some mocking, but Jarek did not run. He grabbed a piece of broken wood from the ground, holding it like a sword. It was foolish, laughable against Veros's weapon, but his grip was firm. He rushed forward, swinging with all his strength. The captain blocked it with one hand, the wood snapping into pieces. Yet his eyes narrowed. For a human child, the strike had been fast and filled with will. Not fear. Not surrender. Jarek stumbled back, breath heavy, chest pounding. Veros struck again, faster this time. The blade's red glow sliced past Jarek's face, close enough to burn his cheek. The crowd howled with delight, but Jarek ducked, rolled, and threw a handful of dirt into the captain's eyes. For a second, the great pirate blinked. The boy had dared to trick him. The crew gasped. Some even stopped cheering. No one had ever done such a thing to their captain. Veros lowered his weapon, wiping the dirt away. Then he laughed again, a booming, echoing laugh that filled the night. "Good," he said, voice shaking the air. "You fight like fire. Small but alive." Jarek's chest heaved, sweat dripping down his face. He knew he could not win, but he also knew something else. The captain had not killed him yet. That meant something. That meant he had shown strength, even if only for a moment. The pirates grew restless. Some shouted for the boy's death. Others whispered, afraid of what it meant that their captain laughed twice in one night. Veros raised his blade again, holding it above Jarek's head. Silence fell. Everyone expected the final strike, but instead the captain slammed his blade into the ground beside the boy. The dirt exploded, but Jarek still stood. Varos leaned down close, his burning eyes meeting the boy's. His voice was low, dangerous, yet almost admiring. "You are not like the others. You are human fire, and fire must not be wasted." The crew stared, stunned. What did their captain mean? Why did he spare the boy? Jarek breathed hard, his mind spinning, but he kept his gaze locked on the pirate. The boy had survived the night, but survival was only the beginning. And what came next would shake the galaxy. The night burned with fire and fear, but the boy was still alive. The people of the colony watched in shock as Captain Varos, the most feared pirate in the galaxy, spared Jarek's life. The pirates whispered among themselves, some angry, some uneasy. They could not understand why their captain had not ended the boy with a single strike. To them, a human child was nothing, weak, fragile, worthless. Yet their leader stood over him, calling him human fire. Varos straightened, his dark armor glowing in the firelight. He raised his weapon, not to kill but to point at the boy. His voice thundered through the night. "You have spirit, boy. But spirit is only a spark. To live, you must burn like a flame. To lead, you must survive the storm." The crew roared in confusion and madness, unsure of his meaning. Then Varos turned to them. "Tonight, this boy will face a challenge. If he lives, he earns my respect. If he dies, then fate has spoken." The pirates cheered, their laughter echoing through the colony. They loved blood games, and now they had a new one to enjoy. Jarek's stomach twisted, but he clenched his fists. He knew there was no escape. Varos had thrown him into the center of a storm, and all eyes were upon him. The captain pointed toward the wreckage of a building where broken crates and metal lay scattered. "You will fight. Not me this time, but one of my warriors." His eyes burned brighter. "Survive him, and you prove your fire is real." From the crowd stepped a giant pirate, larger than any man Jarek had ever seen. His skin was rough, marked with scars, his armor painted with the bones of past victims. He carried a massive chain, wrapped around one arm like a serpent. The crew roared his name, Drask. Jarek's heart hammered. Drask towered over him like a beast, his chain dragging across the ground with a deadly hiss. The boy had no weapon, no shield, no armor, only courage. The circle of pirates tightened, forcing the boy and the giant inside. The colony people were pushed back, their cries drowned by the shouts of the crew. Varos stood still, watching like a king over his arena. Drask grinned, baring sharp teeth. "I will crush you, little spark," he growled. His chain swung through the air, heavy enough to break stone. Jarek's hands trembled. His legs wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. He looked at the dirt beneath his feet, at the broken crates nearby. He had to think. He had to survive. His mind raced. "I cannot fight him with strength. I must use speed. I must use the world around me." The giant struck first. The chain lashed forward, smashing the ground where Jarek had stood only a second before. Dust flew into the air. Jarek rolled aside, his body aching from the impact of the blast. He grabbed a broken pipe from the ground and held it like a staff. The pirates laughed at the sight of a boy holding scrap metal against their champion. But Jarek ignored them. He waited. Drask swung again, faster this time, the chain whistling through the air. Jarek ducked, the chain slicing past his head. He jabbed forward with the pipe, striking the giant's leg. It barely hurt Drask, but it made him stumble for a heartbeat. The crew hissed in surprise. The boy had landed a strike. Fury filled Drask's eyes. He roared, swinging wildly, trying to crush the boy like an insect. Jarek darted between the strikes, his small size and speed keeping him alive. He could not match power, but he could outthink his enemy. He spotted a pile of broken crates behind Drask. An idea flashed in his mind. He rushed toward them, the giant chasing him, chain smashing everything in its path. At the last second, Jarek dove aside and the chain struck the crates, shattering them into splinters. Dust and wood filled the air, clouding Drask's vision. Jarek grabbed a sharp shard of metal from the debris and hurled it at Drask's face. It cut across the giant's cheek, leaving a thin line of blood. The crowd gasped. The boy had drawn blood from the pirate. Drask roared with rage, his voice shaking the air. He charged like a bull, chain whipping forward. Jarek tripped, falling hard to the ground. The chain wrapped around his arm, pulling tight, burning his skin. Pain shot through him. He screamed, but his eyes still burned with fire. Drask yanked the chain, lifting the boy off the ground. The pirates howled with glee. It was over, but Jarek did not give up. He swung his legs, kicking hard at Drask's face. Once, twice. The third kick smashed into the giant's nose, sending blood pouring. Drask staggered, dropping the chain in shock. Jarek hit the ground, rolling free, gasping for air. The crowd was silent for a moment. The boy had escaped. He was still alive. Drask, furious and bleeding, grabbed his chain again, ready to crush the child once and for all. But before he could strike, Captain Varos raised his hand. Enough. The crew froze. Varos stepped into the circle, his presence like a storm. He looked at Jarek, covered in dust and blood, still standing tall. Then he looked at Drask, wounded and humiliated. The captain's voice was calm but sharp. The boy has fire. He faced death and did not bow. He is no weakling. He turned to his crew, his burning eyes sweeping over them. From this day forward, he is under my command. Harm him and you answer to me. The pirates roared in disbelief. Some shouted in anger. Others whispered in fear. But none dared oppose their captain. Jarek stood there shaking, breathing hard. He had survived. He had faced a giant and lived. But inside he knew the truth. This was only the beginning. The challenge was not over. It had only just begun. And somewhere deep inside, Captain Varos was smiling, not with cruelty, but with interest. For the first time in years, the galaxy's deadliest pirate had found something new. A boy with fire. The night was far from over. The fire still burned in the colony, smoke rising into the star-filled sky. People huddled together in silence, too afraid to move. The pirates laughed and shouted, but there was a tension in their voices now. They had seen something that disturbed them. A boy, just a human boy, had faced death and survived. Jarek stood in the circle, his chest rising and falling like a drum. His arms ached. His face was dirty and bruised, but his eyes still burned with the same fire. He had fought Drask, the giant warrior, and lived. That alone was something no one expected. But what happened next was even stranger. Captain Varos had claimed him. The pirates could not understand it. They whispered to each other, their voices sharp with anger and disbelief. Some wanted Jarek dead, to erase the shame of a child standing against one of their own. Others were quiet, worried about what it meant that their captain had spared him. But Varos himself said nothing more. He only stood tall, his eyes fixed on Jarek as if he saw something no one else could. Jarek felt weak, his legs trembling, but he refused to fall. He met the captain's gaze with the same courage that had carried him this far. He expected death, yet death had not come. Instead, something far more dangerous had arrived. Curiosity. The pirates dragged the colony's people into the center square, forcing them to kneel. Varos raised his blade and spoke in his deep, echoing voice. This colony belongs to me now. Everything you own, everything you grow, every life here is mine. The crowd whimpered in fear. Some cried out, begging for mercy. But Jarek clenched his fists, anger boiling in his chest. He wanted to scream, to fight, to say something. Yet he stayed silent, his mind racing. He knew if he spoke now, he might not be spared again. Then, to everyone's shock, Varos lowered his weapon and turned to his crew. Take what we need. Burn the rest. The pirates cheered and rushed into the colony, setting fire to homes, breaking into storage rooms, dragging away food and machines. Screams filled the air. But through it all, Varos remained silent, watching Jarek. It was then the unexpected turn came. A fight broke out among the pirates themselves. Drask, still bleeding from his nose, shouted in rage. This is madness. You let the boy live. He shamed me. He shamed us all. He raised his chain, pointing it at Jarek. I will finish him now. The crew shouted in agreement. Some raised their weapons, demanding the boy's death. The circle tightened again. Jarek's breath caught. He was surrounded, and this time there would be no escape. But before Drask could strike, Varos moved. His blade flashed faster than lightning, slamming into the ground inches from Drask's feet. Sparks burst into the air. The crew fell silent. Varos's voice was calm but filled with thunder. You dare question me? Drask froze, his teeth grinding, but even he did not move against his captain. His hands shook with rage, but he lowered his weapon. Varos stepped closer, his eyes burning like fire. The boy has fire. He stood against you and still breathes. That makes him stronger than you think. Stronger than you. The words cut deeper than any blade. Drask's face twisted in shame. The crew muttered, some laughing at his humiliation, others uneasy at their captain's strange choice. Jarek, still standing in the dust, realized the truth. Varos was protecting him. Not because he cared, but because he saw something. Something that made even his own crew hesitate. But that protection came with a price. The night stretched on, the colony now a ruin. The pirates carried their loot back to the ships. Fires spread across the buildings, lighting the sky like a sea of red stars. And through it all, Varos gave one order. The boy would come with them. The people gasped. Yarek's mother cried out, trying to reach him, but the pirates shoved her back. The boy looked at her, his heart breaking, but he did not fight. He knew if he resisted, his family would suffer, so he let them take him. The crew dragged him up the ramp of the massive ship. Inside, the air smelled of oil, smoke, and blood. Weapons lined the walls, and the floor shook with the power of engines. The pirates laughed as they pushed him down the corridor, mocking him, calling him the captain's pet. But Jarek said nothing. He kept his head up, his fire unbroken. When they reached the main hall, Varos stood at the center, his eyes fixed on the boy. He gestured for the crew to leave, and slowly, one by one, they did. Soon only the captain and the boy remained. The hall was silent except for the hum of the engines. Varos stepped closer, towering above him. His voice was lower now, calmer, almost curious. "Do you know why I spared you, boy?" Yarek swallowed, shaking his head. "No." The captain leaned down, his eyes burning brighter. "Because I see myself in you. Long ago I was weak, but I had fire, and fire can burn the stars." The boy's heart pounded. He did not know if those words were a gift, a curse, or both, but he did know one thing. His life was no longer his own. He was part of something far larger, far darker, and as the pirate ship lifted into the sky, leaving his burning home behind, Yarek realized the truth. The encounter was over, the challenge had begun, and the galaxy itself was about to change. The pirate ship cut through the dark sky, leaving the burning colony far behind. Yarek pressed his face against the cold metal bars of the small chamber where the crew had locked him. He could still see the smoke rising from his home, a trail of sorrow fading into the stars. His chest hurt, not just from the bruises on his body, but from the memory of his mother's cry when they pulled him away. He was no longer part of the colony. He was a prisoner of the pirates, but the boy did not break. His fists were clenched, his eyes still burning with the same stubborn fire. Fear twisted inside him, but another feeling grew stronger. Anger. He whispered to himself, "I will not bow. I will not forget." The ship rumbled as it entered deep space. The pirates laughed in the halls, boasting of the loot they had taken, mocking the boy as the captain's little flame. They thought it was a joke, but none dared touch him again. Captain Varos had made his command clear. The boy was under his protection. Days passed in shadows. Yarek was given scraps of food and water, just enough to survive. He spent most of his time alone, thinking, remembering his home. Yet every now and then Varos appeared. The captain never spoke long, but his presence filled the chamber like a storm. One evening Varos entered, his heavy steps echoing on the steel floor. He carried no weapon, only his towering presence. Yarek stood when he came, refusing to kneel. "You do not bow," Varos said in his deep voice. "No," Yarek answered, his voice small but steady. The captain tilted his head, studying him. "Good. Bowing breaks the fire, and fire is what I need." Yarek frowned, unsure of his meaning. "Why me? I am only a boy." "You could have killed me like the others." Varos's eyes glowed brighter, the light reflecting in the shadows. "Because you are not like the others. You looked at me and did not see death. You saw a challenge. That is rare. Too rare." For the first time, Yarek saw something strange in the pirate's eyes. Not just cruelty. Not just hunger for power. But something hidden. A memory, perhaps. A wound. Varos left without another word, but the boy could not forget that look. The bond began slowly. Yarek was allowed to move around the ship under watch. He saw the crew repairing weapons, loading stolen goods, preparing for the next raid. They spat at him, mocked him, but none dared strike him. The captain's protection was iron. One night, while sneaking through the lower halls, Yarek overheard two pirates whispering. "The captain is losing his mind," one said. "First he spares the boy, now he shields him like a son." "Careful," the other hissed. "Speak too loud and you'll join the bodies floating outside the airlock." Jarek's heart raced. He knew now that his presence was dangerous not only for himself, but for Varos as well. The crew would not accept him forever. Later that night, Varos called him to the command chamber. The room was filled with stars shining through the wide glass. The galaxy stretched endless and cold. Varro stood at the center, staring at the void. "Do you know why I became a pirate?" he asked suddenly, his back turned. Jarek shook his head. "No." Varros's voice was low, heavy with something deeper than anger. "Because no one gave me a choice. I was born weak in a world that crushed the weak. I rose by fire, by blade, by refusing to kneel. Every scar you see on me is a story. A reminder." He turned then, his burning eyes locking onto Jarek's. "And you remind me of that. A spark that refuses to die. That is why I keep you alive." Jarek's throat tightened. He did not want to feel anything for this man who had destroyed his home. But in that moment he saw a shadow of truth. Varros was not just a monster. He was something else. Something broken. The days grew longer. Varros began testing Jarek, giving him small tasks. Carrying supplies, learning the ship's systems, even holding a weapon for the first time. The crew hated it. They whispered of mutiny, of ending the boy before he grew stronger. But Varros silenced them with a single look. One day, Varros handed him a small blade, simple but sharp. "Every warrior needs a weapon. Even fire must have a spark to strike." Jarek took it, his hands shaking. He wanted to throw it away, to reject anything that tied him to these pirates. But he also knew he needed it. He needed strength if he was to survive. That night he trained alone, slashing at shadows, whispering to himself, "I will grow stronger, strong enough to fight them, strong enough to fight him." But deep inside another thought haunted him. What if the captain was right? What if fire was his path? The bond was growing, though Jarek fought against it. Varro saw him as something more than a boy. The crew saw him as a danger. And Jarek himself saw a storm rising, one that would either burn him alive or make him something the galaxy would never forget. And far beyond the stars, enemies of Varros waited. They had heard whispers of the human boy aboard the pirate's ship. They did not laugh. They feared what it could mean, for even the smallest spark could one day set the stars on fire. The pirate ship drifted through the cold sea of stars, its engines humming like the growl of a beast. Inside, the air was heavy with tension. The crew worked, but their eyes burned with anger. Whispers spread like poison through the halls. Whispers about the boy. Jarek had now been aboard the ship for weeks. His body grew stronger from training, his mind sharper from watching and learning. Captain Varros had given him tasks, sometimes even allowing him to stand at the edge of the command deck while the stars stretched endless before them. To the crew, this was madness. To them, he was still just a human child, but to their captain, he was something more. And that difference tore at their loyalty. One night, while Jarek walked through the lower decks, he felt it, the weight of eyes following him. Pirates leaned in the shadows, muttering curses as he passed. One spat on the floor near his feet. Another snarled, "You don't belong here, little flame. You are a curse." Jarek kept walking, his fists clenched, but his head high. He had learned one thing from Varros, never bow. Yet deep down, fear twisted in his stomach. He knew they hated him. He knew they would not stay silent forever. The breaking point came faster than anyone expected. A rival pirate gang ambushed them in a dead stretch of space. Their ships appeared from the void like hungry wolves, weapons glowing red. The alarm screamed and the crew rushed to battle stations. Blades and guns lit the halls as the ship shook with enemy fire. Jarek was thrown to the ground as the ship rattled. Smoke filled the corridors. Pirates ran past him, shouting orders, some pushing him aside. But he didn't run. He forced himself to his feet, racing toward the command deck. He had to see. He had to know if this was the end. When he reached the deck, Varros stood at the center, calm as a storm. His blade glowed at his side, his burning eyes fixed on the enemy ships outside the glass. "Hold the line," he thundered. "We do not fall tonight," the crew shouted in reply, their loyalty holding for now. Weapons fired, the ship groaned, and outside, explosions lit the dark sky. But in the middle of the chaos, Jarek saw something others did not. On the enemy ship, he spotted a faint shimmer near the asteroids. A trap, hidden mines waiting for Varros' ship to pass. His eyes widened. If they moved forward, they would be destroyed. "Stop!" Jarek shouted. His voice cracked, but it cut through the noise. "There's a trap!" "Mines by the rocks." The crew froze. Some laughed, mocking his cry. "The boy sees ghosts," one pirate sneered. "He's nothing but a curse." But Varros turned, his fiery eyes narrowing. He looked at Jarek, then at the screen. For a moment, silence stretched. Then he growled, "He's right." Gasps filled the room. Varos ordered the ship to shift course, narrowly avoiding the mines. In the next instant, the enemy ships triggered them by mistake. The blast tore through half their fleet. The rival pirates screamed in defeat, fleeing into the black void. The crew cheered in victory, but their voices carried a bitter edge. They had survived because of the boy, and that was something they could not accept. When the battle was over and silence returned, the whispers turned darker. In the shadows of the ship, the crew gathered. They spoke of mutiny. "He is a curse," one said. "He makes us weak. He makes the captain blind," another growled. "Varos trusts him more than us." "The boy must die," Drask hissed, his scarred face twisted with hate. "And if the captain defends him, then the captain dies too." The plan was set. Jarek, unaware, sat in his small chamber sharpening the blade Varos had given him. He whispered to himself, repeating the words the captain had once said, "Fire must not bow." But his heart was restless. He felt the storm coming. He could almost hear it in the silence of the halls. Later that night, the mutineers struck. Pirates stormed the deck, weapons raised, eyes burning with betrayal. They moved not against the boy first, but against their own leader. Varos rose, his blade flashing to life, fire burning in his eyes. "Traitors," he growled. "You think you can take my ship?" The crew roared in defiance. Drask stepped forward, chain in hand. "You've grown weak, Captain. Protecting a human child? You've forgotten what it means to lead. Tonight we take back what is ours." The deck erupted in chaos. Blades clashed, gunfire echoed, sparks rained down. Varos fought like a storm, each strike cutting through his betrayers. But there were too many. Jarek stood frozen in the corner, heart racing. He could run, he could hide, but instead his hand tightened around his blade. His fire burned hotter than ever. He rushed forward, striking one of the mutineers who aimed at Varos's back. The pirate fell, shocked that the boy had dared to fight. Jarek's chest heaved, fear mixing with fury. Varos turned, eyes meeting Jarek's. For a heartbeat, the great pirate smiled, not with cruelty, but with pride. "Stand with me, boy," he thundered. "Tonight you are no prisoner. Tonight you fight as one of us." The bond was sealed in blood and fire, but the night was far from over. The mutiny raged and the breaking point had come. What happened next would decide not only Jarek's fate, but the fate of the deadliest pirate in the galaxy. The ship shook with fire and betrayal. Blades clashed against steel. Voices roared in anger and sparks lit the halls like falling stars. The mutiny had begun, and the air was thick with blood and smoke. Jarek's heart pounded as he stood beside Captain Varos, the deadliest pirate in the galaxy. The boy had no armor, no great weapon, only the small blade Varos had given him. But he held it tightly, refusing to let fear break him. The mutineers rushed forward, led by Drask, his chain swinging wildly. "Kill them both," he shouted, his voice booming across the deck. "No mercy." The crew followed with madness in their eyes. For years they had feared Varos, obeying his every command. But now their fear had turned to hatred, fueled by jealousy of a single human boy. They believed their captain had grown weak. They believed tonight they could kill him. Varos stood tall, his blade glowing with deadly red light. "You dare betray me?" he thundered, his voice shaking the walls. "Then drown in your own blood." He struck first, his weapon slicing through two pirates at once. The deck exploded into chaos. Blades clanged, chains cracked, and shouts filled the air. Jarek ducked as a pirate swung at him, then stabbed forward with all his strength. The blade cut the man's leg, sending him crashing to the ground. The boy's chest burned with fear, but also something more. Fire. Varos fought like a storm, each swing of his blade carving a path through his enemies. But the mutineers were many, and for every one that fell, two more rose. Even the great captain began to tire. His armor was scratched, blood dripped from his arm, but still he roared and fought. Jarek stayed close, watching every move, every opening. When a pirate aimed at Varos from behind, Jarek leapt, slamming his blade into the man's arm. The pirate screamed, dropping his weapon. Varos turned, finished him with a single strike, then looked at the boy. For the second time that night, the captain smiled. "You fight like fire," he growled. Jarek's breath came fast, sweat dripping down his face, but he stood tall. He was no longer the weak boy from the colony. He was something else now. But then Drask stepped forward, his chain glowing with cruel energy. His eyes burned with rage and shame. "Enough," he roared. "This ends tonight, Captain. You and your little flame both die here." He swung the chain with deadly force. Varos raised his blade to block, but the strike was too heavy. The chain slammed into his chest, sending him crashing to the ground. The crew roared with victory, circling in to finish him. "Captain!" Yarrick shouted, rushing to his side. He stood over Varos, his small frame shaking but unbroken. The pirates laughed at the sight. A boy protecting the deadliest man in the galaxy. But Jarrick's fire did not bow. He raised his blade, his voice cutting through the noise. "You will not take him." The pirates paused, surprised at his defiance. Drask sneered. "You think you are one of us, boy? You are nothing." He swung his chain again, aiming to crush him. Jarrick leapt aside, the chain smashing into the floor. Sparks flew. With all his strength, Jarrick rushed forward and drove his blade into Drask's arm. The giant roared in pain, swinging wildly. Jarrick stumbled back, nearly falling, but Varos rose behind him, his eyes burning brighter than ever. With a roar that shook the ship, Varos struck. His blade cut through the chain, sparks exploding in every direction. Drask stared in shock as his weapon fell in pieces. "You forgot one thing," Varos growled. "Fire cannot be crushed." With one final strike, the captain's blade cut Drask down. The giant collapsed, silence falling over the crew. Their leader of mutiny was dead. The remaining pirates froze. Some dropped their weapons, others bowed their heads. None dared move against Varos again. The battle was over. Varos, breathing hard, lowered his blade. Blood dripped from his wounds, his strength fading. He turned to Jarrick, the boy who had stood beside him, the boy who had refused to run. For a moment, the fire in his eyes softened. "You are more than fire now," he said, his voice low, almost gentle. "You are flame enough to burn the stars." Then, to the shock of all who watched, Varos knelt before the boy. His great armor clanged against the steel floor. He placed his blade in Jarrick's hands. "From this day," Varos declared, his voice echoing through the silent deck, "you are my heir, my captain. The ship is yours," the pirates gasped. Some shouted in disbelief, but none dared challenge him. The strongest man in the galaxy had named a boy as his successor. Jarrick's chest rose and fell, his hands trembling as he held the blade. He looked at the crew, at the stars beyond the glass, at the future stretching before him. He had once been a boy from a forgotten colony. Now he stood as the heir to the deadliest pirate in the galaxy. The galaxy would never laugh at humans again, because on that night, in the silence after the storm, a new name was born. The name of a boy who had faced death, fire and betrayal, and risen, Captain Jarrick.